Section 2.4, subtracting integers. When you're subtracting integers, it can be difficult for some students to understand how we go about the process of subtracting integers. So I thought that I might start with a little bit of a demo here. We have this poor gentleman here who is going to be lifted up into the air by some positive balloons. Right, positive integer balloons. So right now I've got 3 positive integer balloons, and they're going to lift this gentleman. They're going to lift him upwards. Okay? He's going to go up with those balloons. Now, if I were to take some negative bricks and tie those negative bricks to him, that would unfortunately bring him down with some negative bricks. And we'll even make this one yellow because you guys know yellow positive, red negative. So the 3 positive balloons are lifting him up and the 2 negative bricks are lifting him down. Now, if I were to subtract the negatives, that's a positive thing because he would start to go up more. Right now, because there's 3 positive balloons and 2 negative bricks, he's still going to lift. There's more positives than negatives. It's still going to be a positive. But if I start to take off the negatives, he's going to head up further. He's going to be more positive. He's going to lift up more. So when we are subtracting a negative, we are actually increasing the positive. We're taking the negative away. So I'm going to try and explain that the best that I can over here. So we have positive 4 minus negative 3. We're taking away a negative. So when we take away a negative, it is a lot like we are adding a positive. So what we would end up with is, instead of negative 4 minus positive 4 minus negative 3, we would end up with positive 4 plus positive 3. Okay? If you looked at it, positive 4 plus minus negative 3 equals positive 7, and positive 4 plus positive 3 equals positive 7. So when we are subtracting integers, when you subtract integers, you can change the operation and change the sign of the second integer. You're basically making subtraction questions into addition questions because addition is easier than subtraction. So let's just add. When it comes to integers, subtracting negatives and positives from positives and negatives, it can get very confusing. So we are going to look at all subtraction questions when it comes to integers as addition questions. You change the operation, you change the sign of the second integer. So examples here, if I had a positive minus a positive, most people can do that, but you can change it to an addition question. Instead of subtracting a positive, you're adding a negative. Some people find adding easier, myself included. Most students do as well. You change the operation, you change the sign. When you subtract a negative, change the operation, change the sign, you add a positive. When you subtract a positive from a negative, you change the operation to addition, and you change the positive to a negative. You change the operation, you change the second sign. If you have a negative subtracting a negative, you change the operation, change the second sign. So now instead of subtracting a negative, you're adding a positive. This all can be very confusing, so I'm hoping I can show you over here. Again, change the operation, subtraction to addition, and change the second integer sign. When you're doing addition, you don't change addition. We're working on changing subtraction so that it's an easier question to deal with. So an example of that would be negative 3 minus negative 5. Subtracting a negative from a negative is difficult. It's a lot harder to do than adding a negative. If it was negative 3 plus negative 5, it would be negative 8. 3 and 5 is 8, both negative. But because you're subtracting a negative, you're taking away negatives, which is a positive. So we change the operation and change the second sign. So it's negative 3 plus positive 5. We've just changed the operation, changed the second integer sign to a positive. And negative 3 plus positive 5 is positive 2. You could use tiles for that if you'd really like to and cancel them out. But negative 3 plus positive 5 is positive 2. Same thing on the other side. I've just changed the second integer to a positive. Instead of it being negative 3 minus negative 5, it's negative 3 minus positive 5. So I change the operation, I change the second sign, negative 3 plus negative 5 instead of negative 3 minus positive 5. You are taking away a positive, which means you're adding a negative. Just as when we took away a negative, we were adding a positive. If we bring that down, negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. This can be a little bit confusing at first, I understand that, but if you can remember that mantra almost, or that part that when you take away a negative, if you take a negative away, it means that it's positive, right? If you take something bad away, usually it means things are better. So if you take away a negative, you're technically making things a little more positive, so you're adding a positive. When you're taking away a positive, you're making things a little bit more negative. So you're adding a negative. Instead of subtracting a negative, we're going to add a positive. When subtracting a positive, that means we're just adding a negative. It's just a different way of looking at it. But if you can remember the saying, change the operation, change or subtraction to add, and then change the second integer sign, change the operation, change the sign. So I want you to give it a shot. I want you to try this question for practice at home. Negative 10 minus positive 3. Just remember, change the operation, change the second sign.